If you're starting a UI UX project with a new client, how you structure your design file can make or break the process. In this session, we'll dive into Figma and walk through real examples of best practices that will save you time, keep things organized, and help you avoid messy handoffs down the line. And if you're new here, my name is Pierre, and I've been working UI UX for over a decade with both enterprise teams and early stage startups. And now I'm going to show you the 80/20 of what matters when setting up your design files so you can focus on what actually moves the needle instead of wasting time fixing things later. Now, before we jump into the design file, I want to give you some high-level perspective and tips that I learned over the years, which is going to help you understand the structure and the reasons why we're going to make certain decisions at different stages of the business. Because companies are going to evolve and what makes sense at one stage is not going to make sense at another one. So, for example, in the startup phase, which is stage one, you're very likely going to be the only designer in the team, and you're going to basically be prompted to work very agile and fast. So you wanted to have a design structure which is going to enable you to do just that. So you don't want to have design files and too many options, too many elements which are not going to enable the startup to grow to the next stage fast. Now, the second stage is going to be where more structure is going to come into place because likely they're going to hire more designers and other team members which are going to facilitate the creation of the structure. So at this stage, the idea has already been validated. They know there's a market there, they have a product, they have cash flow going on, hopefully, or at least funding, which is going to alleviate some of the pains that they're going to have in the startup phase. And this is where you can start to structure things and expand in a more natural way. And then the first stage is going to be enterprise. Now, in the enterprise stage, this is where a lot of the more advanced and nuanced design system elements are going to come into place. And you're most likely going to work with either national or international design teams. So a lot of the design system best practices are going to be fundamental in order to allow the company to grow and basically have a structured approach which is going to work in a seamless manner. Now, this is important to keep in mind because that is going to dictate the reasons and the logic of our approach. Now we're going to jump into Untitled UI, which is going to be the file that I'm going to use for this demo. It's an amazing design system and components library. However, based on what we discussed just a moment ago, you're soon going to notice some patterns and you're going to notice what you actually need at the start of a project for a new company compared to what an enterprise or a company that's experiencing growth is going to need. Now, that being said, the name of the game is to think like a chess player. So you want to, even if you're just working with a startup or a new company, you already want to see into the future and lay out the foundations in a way which is going to allow for expansion and especially in a flexible way. So even if you start small, you can then grow into more complexity and more flexibility for the design system. Now, we're going to essentially examine what I personally believe are the bare minimum elements that you need. So most of you are going to start with a boilerplate template, which might be a UI kit, such as this one, or something similar. The problem is that in a lot of UI kits like this, you just have so much right off the bat. And for example, when it comes to color styles, what I personally recommend is to just start with the basics. So just start with the primary colors. So the brand color, which might be one, two, maximum three brand colors at a time. and you can create different shades of the main brand color, which is going to be the color that you're going to use all the time. For example, for buttons, for all sorts of different call to actions, visuals, illustrations. So that is the main brand color. Then you're going to have colors which are going to be fixed for error states, warning states, success states. So those are going to be applicable to all companies pretty much for all of those UI components which are going to need those type of states. Now, an addition which I think it's a must these days is also to examine and identify the grays, so the gray colors, and then you're going to have the base white and black, which for the very most part is going to be unvaried. So I would say this is going to be the bare minimum. You can just start with these colors. You're going to be good to go and set. There's also secondary colors in a lot of these systems. Now, although this is a nice addition, I think it can be confusing at the beginning and it's not necessary. So this is an optional element which you might want to integrate or you can simply delete in order to keep the focus on the main colors that you're focusing on. So as you can see, there is a lot. There is gradients, there is all sorts of different elements connected to variables. And I think this is great, but if you're starting a new project, I would highly recommend you to just focus and dial down on what actually is going to bring 90% of the results with 10% of effort. This is going to be a recurring pattern in the way that we approach things. Let's talk about typography. Now, typography is going to follow the same lines of thinking. And what you want to do is to identify both typefaces which are going to be used in the website as well as in the web app. And there's a different school of thoughts when it comes to this. Some designers prefer to have two separate typeface sheets, typography sheets, one for website usage only and one for web apps only. You can also create a hybrid as we have over here. So this is going to essentially be a very comprehensive list of typefaces and fonts in all sorts of different sizes. So you can use them both in the website and in the web app. I really like this approach. I think it makes sense, but nonetheless, that's an option that you have at your disposal. And again, I would focus on certainly the H1s all the way to the H6, so the heading one all the way to H6. And then you definitely want to have some variations of the body. So one which is going to be larger, medium, and small just comes in so handy at all times, as well as some call to actions of some sorts. So that's going to be, and by call to action, I'm referring to the hyperlink specifically. So that would be something that you definitely want to consider. And again, this is going to be quite straightforward. In this kit, you're also going to notice they add some other elements like logos, which I think are extremely optional, icons, and this should require a lesson in of itself. In fact, I shot many videos on icon sets and how to find the perfect icon library for your project. And when it comes to icon sets, definitely I would add it in the design system. You want to find an icon set which is going to be working well, responsibly. It needs to be a large icon set so that you're never going to run out of the most important icons, as well as having an icon set which is going to work well and be easy to implement. So you don't want to have an icon set which is going to be nested in folders that you're going to basically need to search each and every time you're looking for an icon. You want to make it easy and search it directly from the assets panel. So that is going to make your life easier. Then following the icons shadows, this is going to be effects that most likely you're going to apply in the majority of your projects. So you definitely want to have a shadow section inside of your design system. And this can be set up right from the start. I don't really believe that there's anything that is holding you back from setting this up right from the early stages. So this is actually quite a neat way to go about it. Having shadows all the way from the smaller shadows all the way to the larger ones are going to make it so much easier, as well as elements like spacing, radius, and grids. However, I'm going to bring in a small note over here, and that is that when you're first starting out with startups, you're most likely going to need to work quite fast. So elements like spacing are definitely ideal to implement. They're a great thing to implement. However, the likelihood of you going into and making these designs very granular, especially in the early stages when you need to move really fast, is not going to be realistic in a lot of scenarios. Not saying that in every scenario is going to be like that. So this, I would consider it as optional, and you can always refine it later within the design system. And I would say those are the essential elements when you're first starting out with creating a design system and creating a file. So I would just focus on those elements. And after that, there's going to be the components, which in essence, we're going to simply keep the most basic components, such as the buttons and drop downs, input fields. But the realistically components, I wouldn't really overthink them because the component section of your design library is going to be a section which is going to be ever evolving and also changing with time. So this is going to be where things are going to be updated on the go, and you're going to see this file as a living and breathing file, which are always going to adjust. And if you have any specific questions regarding this topic, again, I'm a lead designer with over a decade of experience, so feel free to let me know, and I'll see you in the very next video.